3 years ago, Nick tied the knot with Jolie. Frankly, had it not been for her unexpected inheritance of the family business following her father's untimely demise, Nick might never have walked down the aisle with her. Mr. Rigmillan, once robust and seemingly invincible, succumbed to a sudden stroke, leaving Jolie as his sole heir. Nick, a charming but idle individual accustomed to leeching off women, couldn't help but take notice. Jolie, swayed by Nick's smooth talk and promises, fell under his spell, while Nick saw in her a golden opportunity, his plan to bide his time until something more lucrative came along. As luck would have it, Jolie's inheritance turned out to be the golden ticket Nick had been waiting for. With her newfound wealth, she became his jackpot. Nick, confident in his ability to manipulate her growing affection, envisioned controlling her fortune for his own gain. Initially, Nick's scheme unfolded smoothly. Jolie, engulfed in grief over her father's passing, leaned on Nick for support, oblivious to his ulterior motives. Nick seized the moment, showering Jolie with care and attention during her time of need, all the while concealing his true intentions. He kept up his facade until they exchanged vows, ensuring there was no turning back. After the funeral, Nick proposed marriage, suggesting they wait until Jolie had mourned her father properly. However, when Jolie questioned the necessity of a prenuptial agreement, Nick's true colors began to emerge. "Nick, is this just a business move?" Jolie queried, echoing the sentiments of Mr. Chinland, her father's trusted advisor. "It's humiliating." "Do you think I'm only after your money?" she protested. Nick, taken aback by her defiance, responded defensively, "Honey, it's merely a precaution. We need it just in case. My godfather insists on it. He's always looked out for me, like a second father." Though Jolie's understanding of financial matters might have been lacking due to her privileged upbringing, she possessed a tenacity that transcended her naivety. When she set her sights on a goal, she pursued it relentlessly. Nick, finding himself backed into a corner, begrudgingly acquiesced to all of Mr. Chin's conditions. While the terms of the marriage contract seemed standard, they effectively stripped Nick of any entitlements. It was abundantly clear that Jolie's inherited business and assets would remain solely hers. Nick had assumed he'd have a share in the dividends and the opportunity to amass new wealth. However, the meticulous contract drawn up by a top-tier lawyer dashed those hopes. Despite this setback, Nick convinced himself that the marriage still held benefits. He saw it as a means to tap into his wife's finances without oversight, building his own capital for the future. He planned to siphon money from their joint budget daily, funneling it into his own accounts. Yet Nick's optimism was misplaced once again. Mr. Chinland, a principled and responsible figure, not only oversaw Jolie's business finances but also controlled her personal wealth. Nick found himself restricted in his personal spending, but he remained hopeful, anticipating how the situation might unfold. His patience was eventually rewarded. Despite their efforts, Jolie struggled to conceive, her desire for motherhood overshadowed by repeated disappointment. Initially attributing it to stress, she eventually sought medical intervention after over a year of failed attempts, uncovering the underlying cause of their struggles. Jolie's symptoms, initially dismissed as mere consequences of her busy lifestyle, were ominous signs that her body was in distress, a warning she had chosen to ignore. Eventually, the grim truth emerged. She was diagnosed with cancer. Over nearly 2 grueling years, she endured treatments and suffering with little to show for it. Throughout this ordeal, Nick's role as a husband was merely nominal. His vested interest lay in Jolie's existence being inconsequential, a fact he failed to conceal adequately. While the topic remained unspoken, Jolie couldn't ignore the whispers of her husband's infidelities with numerous other women. Nick, however, fancied himself a master of deception and manipulation. He believed he could convincingly play the part of the devoted spouse to a dying wife without raising suspicion. He considered himself fortunate, convinced that enduring a little longer would secure his desired outcome. Yet Nick's reprehensible conduct became the subject of condemnation and gossip among nurses, hospital staff, and even Mr. Chinland. The latter was both furious and helpless, unable to comprehend Jolie's insistence on preserving a marriage teetering on the brink. Furthermore, the absence of a will left him deeply concerned, as it meant Nick would automatically inherit everything as Jolie's sole heir. That scoundrel stands to inherit everything, including the fruits of Jolie and her father's hard work. It would render everything they've built futile, Mr. Chinland lamented. The elderly man found himself grappling with the delicate task of broaching a sensitive subject with his goddaughter, who, until just yesterday, had exuded health and vitality but now faced an inevitable decline. With each passing moment, her time grew shorter, measured not in months but in weeks. Meanwhile, Nick's anticipation burned bright, his greedy ambitions unmasked in his eager demeanor. He saw in Jolie's looming demise not just tragedy but opportunity, a chance to rid himself of his ailing wife and secure a substantial windfall. Mr. Chinlin silently prayed that he wouldn't have to initiate the discussion about Jolie's will himself. Fortunately, his concerns were unfounded. Jolie took the initiative, revealing a secret plan that left him speechless. Her meticulous plotting, executed with a finesse and ruthlessness he never anticipated, served as a chilling reminder that revenge truly is a dish best served cold. Though Jolie's scheme required little time and effort to devise and execute, it marked the culmination of her earthly journey, allowing her to realize her deepest desires. Sadly, her loved ones did not witness a miraculous recovery. Instead, they bid farewell to Jolie as she passed away, her funeral arrangements meticulously planned and communicated with serene determination, ensuring her final wishes were carried out with precision. The day following the somber farewell ceremony, the notary summoned those named in Jolie's will for its official reading. Nick was taken aback by the unexpected news. He had been convinced that his wife had not taken the precaution of drafting such a document, assuming he would naturally inherit everything, as the law often dictates in such circumstances. Nonetheless, clinging to a glimmer of hope, he reluctantly attended the meeting, accompanied by his new mistress, the stunning Shirley. Upon entering the notary's office, Nick was surprised to find Mr. Chinland and Jolie's friend, Kurt Turgan, in attendance. However, what truly caught him off guard was the sight of Kurt pushing a stroller containing a baby boy. Despite being aware of Kurt's marital status and recent parenthood, Nick's astute instincts quickly pieced together the puzzle, revealing a hidden agenda at play, a realization that left him feeling outwitted. Nevertheless, curiosity compelled Nick to stay and discover the contents of Jolie's will, despite his growing apprehension about its potential humiliation. For what felt like an eternity, silence enveloped the room as each individual occupied their own corner, waiting in tense anticipation. No further attendees arrived, leaving the notary to prolong the preamble, emphasizing the solemnity of the occasion and the honor of carrying out the deceased's final wishes. Even then, Nick could discern from the wicked grin etched on Mr. Chinland's face that the contents of the will were a clandestine affair reserved solely for him. Finally, Nick's name was called. "To my lawful husband Nick, I deny the inheritance," declared the notary, the words ringing with a stark finality. As the brief yet impactful sentence echoed in the room, the notary turned to Nick, prompting him to confirm his understanding of its significance. With a heavy heart and a sense of profound humiliation, Nick could only nod in acquiescence. In that moment, Shirley reached for his hand, ready to defiantly depart, but Nick firmly kept her in place, ignoring her questioning gaze. Though every fiber of his being urged him to flee from the scene of his public disgrace, the drama was far from over, and the invited spectators demanded closure. With a measured pause, the notary continued. "I bequeath all my personal property to my only son, Robert Turgis, until he reaches adulthood. I appoint his father, Kurt Turgan, and Mr. Chinland as guardians and administrators of his estate," announced the notary, dropping a bombshell that reverberated through Nick like a devastating blow to the gut. The revelation of Kurt's paternity shattered Nick's patience, eliciting a shocked cry of disbelief. Yet, aside from Nick and Shirley, the revelation elicited no surprise from the assembled witnesses. "Is the boy Jolie's biological child?" Nick's voice trembled as he gasped for breath, his words punctuated by desperation. "Yes, Robert is the biological son of Jolie and Kurt," Mr. Chinland confirmed, his tone resolute. "She hasn't been pregnant in the last 2 years. It's impossible." Nick grasped at straws, though he knew all too well that modern science had rendered pregnancy unnecessary for parenthood. "The marvels of medical progress never cease to amaze," Mr. Chinland remarked, observing the unfolding scene with a mix of pity and detachment. For Kurt, the memories of 2 years prior flooded back, a chilling reminder of the moment he learned of his best friend's grim prognosis. He marveled at her composure as she calmly discussed her limited time and her unwavering determination to fulfill her maternal longing. "I had my eggs preserved before beginning treatment," she had revealed, her resolve unyielding in the face of adversity. "I was told that I probably wouldn't be able to raise my own child, but I insisted, Kurt. I grew up without a mother. and I know it isn't easy, but I always felt her love and protection. Does Nick agree to raise the child alone? Kurt cautiously inquired. Who would allow him? He would gladly become a guardian and use the baby's money, as he lacks conscience. Jolie replied bitterly. No, I've already realized that my dear spouse is someone of questionable character, to put it correctly, and his reaction to my diagnosis and prognosis. I don't even want to speak about him. This man isn't worth getting upset about. And what of the baby? That's what I wanted to discuss with you. Jolie hesitated, a rare moment of uncertainty for her fearless demeanor. I don't know how to broach the subject delicately. Maybe there is no delicate way. In short, I would like you to be the father of my child. She exclaimed in a high-pitched voice. Are you joking? You have a husband. Kurt clearly wasn't prepared for this sudden proposition. Yes, I do have a husband, and I will have him until the day I die. I've already made that decision, Kurt. Of course, we won't sleep together. It's impossible given my current condition. I can't carry the baby myself. Unfortunately, I have my eggs preserved. Now we need the biological material from the future father. Naturally, I also need a woman to carry and give birth to him, but luckily, such services are available now. Initially dismissing it as absurd, Kurt soon realized that Jolie's plan was meticulously thought out, with every detail carefully considered. She had already undertaken extensive preparatory work, delving into the legal aspects, arranging for services at a reproductive clinic, and even securing a surrogate mother for the future baby. Kurt, I could use the services of a donor for the father for the baby. I really want to leave a piece of myself behind. But when you think about it, who will the baby be with? I've been thinking a lot, but you're the only one I can rely on. I am sure of you, knowing you for so many years. I believe that you will be a great father. I understand that you want to create your own family, get married, and have children naturally. It's logical. But please think about it. Don't answer me right now. For me, after what happened with Nick, it is critical that the father of my child is someone who doesn't prioritize money, someone who won't exploit my assets. I'm not as naive as I was before marriage. Nick taught me a lot. Now I have a lot of life experience. As for you, you don't need any money at all. You have plenty. My father has the money, Kurt interjected, correcting Jolie's line of reasoning for the first time. You know you're going to get it. You work tirelessly to keep the family company thriving. You've never been needy. Now I know for a fact that a man who grew up poor will never stop thinking about having enough to eat. And if his decency is also lacking, there will be a big problem. I have experienced that firsthand, Jolie sadly added. To be honest, I'm completely confused. I had an entirely different idea of becoming a father. I need to consult my parents. Understand that I can't make such a decision alone. I will need the help of close family members when I become a father, so I have to inform them and ask for their opinion. Jolie had no objections, but she requested that Kurt promise to keep their arrangement a secret. The conversation with Kurt's parents proved challenging. His father remained neutral, accepting the situation and promising to support his son's decision and assist with his grandchild as much as possible. His mother, however, struggled with the idea. Like any mother, she wished for her son to marry and have children with a good woman. While she held Jolie in high regard and felt immense sympathy for her, the thought of her potential grandchild being born to another woman, especially with Jolie's illness, was difficult for her to accept. Could the child inherit the disease, she asked, the question lingering uncomfortably in the air. Though hesitant to broach such a sensitive topic, she couldn't ignore the potential risks to her grandchild's health. Jolie does not have a hereditary form of the disease, Kurt reassured her, alleviating some of her anxiety, though not entirely. After careful consideration, she expressed her support for her son's decision, albeit with lingering concerns. Kurt himself grappled with uncertainty. Jolie's proposal had caught him off guard, but after much contemplation, he found no reason to refuse. When he conveyed his approval to Jolie, she was overjoyed, and they began to execute her plan methodically. As Kurt reflected on the profound changes unfolding in his life, Mr. Chinlin reminisced about his conversation with Jolie just over 2 months prior. Beginning with expressions of her respect and admiration for him as a father figure, she eventually revealed her request for him to become her son's guardian. Initially dismissing it as delirium, Mr. Chinlin was left in shock as Jolie detailed the entirety of her plan. Not only had she and Kurt made a bold decision, but they had also managed to keep it hidden for so long. How old is the baby now? Mr. Chinlin inquired. Robert is 8 months old. Jolie beamed. You both truly know how to surprise, Mr. Chinlin remarked, still reeling from the shock. I don't want Nick to find out about the child until after I'm gone. He'll only learn of it when my will is read. It's already been drawn up, and is in the hands of the notary. However, there's one aspect we still need to address. Robert will only have one legal guardian. Upon reevaluating many aspects of my life, I've decided not to leave anything to chance. Kurt has parents, so if anything were to happen to him, Robert would go to them. But I want you to have legal rights as well. Just in case. With his keen understanding of people, the elderly man recognized the potential danger in confronting Nick directly, even though Jolie's husband undoubtedly deserved such treatment. In the hushed atmosphere of the notary's office, everyone was lost in their own thoughts. It was clear to see that Nick was cursing Jolie in every possible manner. People like him often fail to grasp that their own actions may have provoked such responses. Introspection of that kind is often too complex for individuals like him. Why bother looking for faults within oneself? Strangely enough, it was Shirley who broke the silence. She attempted to guide her lover out by the elbow. But Nick had no intention of leaving, feeling compelled to voice his grievances. Are you certain I'm entitled to nothing? No obligatory share or whatever it's called? I am her husband after all. Nick's voice rose in protest. As per the will, you're not listed among the beneficiaries entitled to an obligatory share of the inheritance. Furthermore, I've meticulously reviewed your marriage contract. Its contents are enclosed here. The notary indicated the hefty folder before him with a firm tap. You have slim chances even with a legal challenge, though you naturally retain the right to pursue such action. I'll contest it. Who is this illegitimate child anyway? And who's to say he's really her son? Nick's outburst escalated, oblivious to the weight of his words. Kurt struggled to contain his anger, fighting the urge to strike the arrogant man. Even the typically composed Mr. Chinlin flushed with indignation. Only the notary remained as composed as ever, treating the situation as just another day at the office, unfazed by the drama unfolding before him. Can I see? Nick demanded to examine the evidence. No. You're only entitled to review the portion relevant to you. All other documents, particularly those concerning the child, can only be disclosed with the parent's consent. Naturally, the notary clarified. I do not consent, Kurt interjected firmly. So, access to those documents would only be possible through a court proceeding if the court deems it necessary to request them. That was the breaking point. Nick stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him, determined not to let the matter rest. His mistress, however, bid farewell politely and exited quietly, closing the door behind her. Does it matter that he didn't sign the will? Mr. Chinlin inquired of the notary. There are many like him. It's merely a formality, the notary reassured him. It's almost comical if it weren't so tragic. I still can't fathom how Jolie got mixed up with him. Mr. Chinlin mused aloud, his thoughts lingering in the air as a rhetorical question. With the required paperwork swiftly signed and hands shaken, Mr. Chinlin assisted Kurt in settling little Robert into the stroller. Would you care to join us? I could use some fresh air, and it's good for the baby, Kurt invited. Certainly, I'll join you for a while. They walked in silence, the gentle rustle of the stroller wheels providing a soothing backdrop. Do you think Jolie would approve of how I'm handling everything? Kurt finally voiced the question that had been weighing on his mind. I'm certain she would. You're proving to be a remarkable father, and the bond between you and Robert is undeniable, Jolie's godfather reassured him. Truth be told, there's something that's been nagging at me. You know, I have a feeling Jolie mentioned to you that I had advised against what transpired at the notary's office, Mr. Chinlin brought up. Are you referring to the whole debacle with the will and Nick finding out about Robert? Mr. Chinlin nodded in acknowledgement. Of course, Kurt replied. I was the one who constantly brought up the conversation about that. I didn't like this idea from the very beginning. He's a nasty type, angry, stupid, and mercenary. Why provoke him? Honestly, I even contemplated telling him when the baby was already born. But Jolie was so adamant about keeping it a secret, I felt I had no right to interfere. I thought perhaps she just didn't want to deal with him herself and left these disputes to us. Seeing him today with that woman, shamelessly flaunting it, makes me question whether I made the right decision by not standing my ground. His reaction, the look on his face, it was chilling. Maybe it would have been better to confront him earlier. I believe Jolie didn't want to either. That played a part too, and the desire for revenge. She wanted to get back at him because she loved, regardless of what she claimed later. She loved deeply, and this corrupted love left her no other recourse. My poor girl, the elderly man wiped away a tear trickling down his cheek. Don't grieve for her. She asked us not to. She asked us to direct all our love, which was for her to Robbie. Kurt comforted Jolie's godfather, while the others reminisced. Meanwhile, Nick and Shirley observed from the car, discussing the same topic. So you won't get anything at all, huh? The girl asked incredulously, blinking rapidly. You're such a fool. You heard there's no chance because of this baby. All right, let's go. We need to salvage at least something valuable and move it to my place. 3 days later, Kurt finally gathered the courage to visit Jolie's house, only to find it deserted. He had prepared himself for a confrontation, even hiring 2 security guards for protection. But Nick had anticipated his move and already absconded with plenty of valuables. Now Nick sat alone in the cramped confines of his tiny apartment, nursing a dwindling glass of whiskey that Shirley had left him, a predictable gesture. Why would she need a loser like me? Nick mused, reflecting on how he had ended up in this dismal state. Once, women paid him for his company, but now he found himself offering money to a young, beautiful girl just to keep her around. Ironically, Nick, a gigolo past his prime, withered by his vices, refused to shoulder the blame for his circumstances. In his mind, his wife was the villain who had drained him of vitality and crushed his dreams, leaving him without the inheritance he had so eagerly anticipated. In his fantasies, he was young, handsome, successful, and fabulously wealthy. Yet Shirley's parting words had shattered these illusions. He was nothing more than a destitute drunkard lost in delusions of grandeur. Accepting this reality was a bitter pill to swallow. His grand visions of wealth and success, hinging largely on his ex-wife, crumbled like a house of cards. His aspirations of becoming a successful entrepreneur were dashed. Blinded by his pride, he failed to acknowledge his own role in his downfall. Instead, he directed his resentment towards his late wife, seeing her as the source of all his woes. For nearly 2 weeks, Nick drowned himself in a haze of alcohol, seeking solace from his harsh reality, his bitterness festering with each passing day. Then, one bleak morning, gripped by a pounding hangover, he reached a breaking point. He realized that drowning his sorrows in alcohol wouldn't bring him success or vengeance against Jolie. Nick felt a profound sense of humiliation. A few days prior, representatives from Mr. Chinlin had appeared, practically strong-arming Nick into surrendering his car keys and tearing up the power of attorney that Jolie had granted him. Did you not realize that the power of attorney loses its legal validity after the death of the grantor? One of the men remarked, his tone dripping with disdain. In Nick's mind, he painted himself as a saint who had never left his ailing wife's side. Conveniently, he brushed aside his own endless scheming, gambling habits, alcohol abuse, and dismissive treatment of his wife. How unfortunate that she's dead, and I can't lash out at her, he had thought countless times. I barely suppressed my urge, convincing myself that my patience would be richly rewarded. Now, as he contemplated his next move, thoughts of revenge consumed him. Initially, he had entertained the idea of desecrating her grave. But upon reflection, considering what was most precious to Jolie and what would inflict the deepest anguish, he stumbled upon another answer. Robert. A surge of electricity coursed through Nick as this idea took hold in his mind. He chuckled maliciously, finally concocting his revenge plot. While many details needed ironing out, he had settled on one crucial point: he would not harm Robert. What's a mother's worst nightmare? Not being able to protect her child in times of trouble. That's precisely the fate he planned for. His imagination was ablaze with a simple yet sinister plan: to abduct the baby, whisk him away to a distant location, and abandon him at an orphanage. After a week of dwelling on thoughts of revenge, Nick found solace and satisfaction in his fantasies, if one could call them that. He hadn't smiled like this in ages. Granted, the grimace he wore might have been unsettling to some, but Jolie's husband cared little for appearances. In fact, you could say he was elated as he meticulously plotted every detail. He reveled in a sense of euphoria. Although his target was out of sight, Nick savored the mental image of Jolie's anguish at her inability to protect her child. Once he had outlined his plan in theory, Nick shifted his focus to practicalities. He needed to gather intelligence on Robert's movements and the people he encountered outside the house to pinpoint the perfect time and place for his crime. Having known Kurt well in the past, and even having visited his parents' house, Nick was aware of their affluent suburban community and its heightened security. As he delved deeper into his scheme, he became acutely aware of the obstacles he would face. He couldn't predict how long he'd spend surveilling from the cover of the forest, peering through binoculars, studying the child's routines and activities. Was the risk worth the reward? Without a doubt, Nick reasoned with himself. His mental state had deteriorated significantly since the reading of the will. "She destroyed my life, and I'll destroy her child's," he muttered maliciously. In his twisted fantasies, Nick envisioned himself as a wealthy heir living off the state's provisions, while his deceased mother looked on from the afterlife, bearing the weight of blame for his misdeeds. His laughter echoed with malice, a chilling sound that would have alarmed any bystander with a shred of empathy. But history does not entertain what-ifs, and Nick was left unchecked in his pursuit of his dark ambitions. Once he set his mind on a goal, no matter how sinister, he pursued it relentlessly to its conclusion. For 2 full days, Nick didn't just watch but meticulously prepared the groundwork for his scheme. He scoured the entire area, seeking the perfect vantage point that would afford him an unobstructed view of the settlement, particularly the Turgis household, while keeping him concealed. He poured all his energy and time into finding the ideal spot, ensuring it met his stringent criteria. Day after day, he rose with the dawn, immersing himself in surveillance at the cottage settlement until nightfall. With binoculars in hand, he meticulously documented every movement, noting arrivals and departures with unwavering diligence. Through his observations, Nick learned that the child was under the care of Kurt's grandmother and a nanny. Both Kurt and his mother were unsuitable targets for Nick's plans. It would recognize him immediately. Nick had no intention of facing consequences for his actions. Anticipating police inquiries, he aimed to deflect suspicion away from himself. Thus, he identified the nanny as the target of his scheme. She followed a predictable schedule, walking with Robert along familiar routes at set times. Luck seemed to smile upon Nick when, on a Wednesday, the nanny ventured beyond the settlement's secured confines for a daytime stroll with the sleeping baby. She followed a forest path to a clearing where she met another nanny from a neighboring settlement, her laughter carrying through the air. Recognizing an opportunity, Nick decided to limit his visits to the settlement to Wednesdays, minimizing the risk of drawing attention to himself. His plan was meticulous, akin to a well-oiled machine. Each Wednesday, like clockwork, the nanny ventured into the forest. For 4 consecutive weeks, Nick observed this routine, ensuring its consistency. As the 4th Wednesday approached, he knew the time had come to execute his sinister plan, confident in its precision and success. He acquired a potent stun gun from a local market, exchanging cash to evade detection. Every aspect of his plan was meticulously arranged to minimize the risk of capture. Securing an old car, he appropriated license plates, ensuring they were affixed inconspicuously. He strategically positioned the vehicle for a swift getaway, yet far enough to evade suspicion. Disguising his appearance was paramount, taking precautions to obscure his features and physique to evade identification. Obsessed with thoughts of kidnapping, he became consumed by them, even dreaming of the deed in vivid detail. As the fateful day drew near, he shed nearly 7 kilograms, a physical manifestation of his preoccupation. A haunting aura of neurosis and fixation began to manifest in his countenance, a visible testament to his unraveling psyche. On the appointed Wednesday, he parked in his chosen spot, his nerves taut with anticipation. As he spied the nanny guiding the stroller down the path, a tremor of apprehension coursed through him. The meticulous planning had insulated him from the grim reality of his impending actions. He was poised to confront a stranger, to assault her with a stun gun, and to wrest the child from the safety of the stroller, all in a desperate bid to enact his vengeful scheme. Reality shattered his preconceived notions, starkly contrasting the simulated scenarios of his imagination. Here, everything was palpably real. The unsuspecting woman, the innocent child nestled in the stroller, his gaze filled with innocent wonder. Nick was not inherently predisposed to violence, but his festering animosity towards Jolie propelled him across the threshold of moral restraint. Approaching the nanny, he forcefully pushed her away from the stroller, causing her to stumble and fall. He then unleashed the taser's jolt upon her, rendering her unconscious with a single shock. With trembling hands, he moved to extract the child from the confines of the stroller, his heart racing with adrenaline-fueled urgency. Yet his meticulously crafted scheme was abruptly derailed. As he leaned down to undo the child's restraints, A sudden blow struck his head, sending him reeling to the ground in a dizzying haze of confusion. The next thing Nick knew, he found himself subdued by an elderly man standing over him, scolding Nick while deftly binding his hands. Nick's consciousness slipped away once more. It turned out that the mysterious figure was none other than Mr. Mayo, a respected gamekeeper renowned in the nearby elite communities. His guardhouse, nestled inconspicuously amidst dense foliage, overlooked a clearing frequented by nannies from neighboring settlements, unbeknownst to Nick on that fateful day. Mr. Mayo had been returning from a local errand when he caught sight of suspicious activity. "I spotted someone, cloaked in black despite the morning heat, stationed as a lookout. I decided to observe and investigate," he recounted later to the police. With years of experience navigating the forest, Mr. Mayo adeptly maneuvered without disturbing the wildlife. "I concealed myself behind a tree, keeping vigilant watch. Suddenly, I witnessed a man assaulting a woman, knocking her to the ground. Initially, I feared for her safety, but it became clear he was targeting the child. Acting swiftly, I intervened, striking him with a makeshift cudgel I had prepared," Mr. Mayo elaborated. "Exceptional work, Mr. Mayo. You've become a local hero." "The press is eager to speak with you," remarked one of the officers. "No, I prefer to stay out of the limelight. That's not my style." Mr. Mayo declined, quietly retreating to his abode via a circuitous route to evade pursuit. He considered his actions nothing out of the ordinary, believing anyone would have done the same in his position. "How could I stand by when those in need of protection were in harm's way?" he reflected. A few hours later, Kurt arrived at Mr. Mayo's house, gratitude pouring from his words. "I'm the father of the boy you saved today. He's a resilient kid. Once I held him, he settled right down. Such bravery and intelligence in those eyes. We're deeply thankful you were there when it mattered." "We can't express our gratitude enough," Kurt expressed, his voice laden with emotion after a tumultuous day. "Is there any way I can repay you?" Kurt inquired earnestly. Mr. Mayo waved off the notion with a humble smile. "No need for thanks. When a child's safety is at stake, there's no hesitation," he replied, genuinely touched by Kurt's appreciation. Yet Kurt persisted, wanting to show his gratitude. "If you insist, perhaps a new hunting suit and some provisions for my dog? Consider it done. But may I ask, was your intervention motivated by money?" Mr. Mayo's curiosity prompted him to pose the question. "Oh, sadly, it's much more complicated than that," Kurt replied, his voice tinged with regret. Mr. Mayo listened attentively, prompting Kurt to share further details of their tumultuous past. As Kurt recounted the series of events, from Jolie's illness to her unconventional parenting decision and subsequent passing, Mr. Mayo nodded in understanding. "I live somewhat isolated here, so to speak, and rarely hear such tales," he remarked. Kurt elaborated on Nick's motivations, highlighting the investigator's insight that Nick's actions were driven not solely by greed, but by a deep-seated desire for revenge. "He was consumed by it," Kurt explained. Relieved to share the complexities of the situation with an impartial listener, Kurt pondered aloud, questioning if their actions had driven Nick to the brink of madness and revenge. "If it were just about himself, I wouldn't suffer such reflexivity. But everything he and Jolie did ultimately revolved around their son," Kurt reflected. Turning to Mr. Mayo for his perspective, Kurt asked, "Do you think we played a role in pushing him to this point? Are we responsible for his desire for revenge?" "Are you serious? You're an adult, and you're talking such nonsense." Mr. Mayo's blunt truth hit Kurt hard, offering a fresh perspective on Nick's actions. "That Nick of yours always found a reason. He doesn't even need one. He married for money, cheated shamelessly, mistreated his sick wife, and convinced himself it was all her fault. What's her fault? For retaliating once? For losing patience? For not enduring it?" Mr. Mayo's words resonated deeply with Kurt, prompting him to reflect on the situation. Grateful for the insight, Kurt smiled in response. "Now, I also owe you for your good advice," he acknowledged. The gamekeeper waved his hand dismissively. They parted as friends, with Mr. Mayo promising to look after Robert. "I heard somewhere that the Chinese have this belief or wisdom, God knows what to call it, that if you save someone's life, you're responsible for that person forever. So don't worry about your Robert. I'll look after him here too," Mr. Mayo assured Kurt. True to his word, Mr. Mayo became a regular presence in Kurt's household, providing support and love to Robert. Meanwhile, Nick was sentenced to several years of imprisonment, bringing a sense of relief to Kurt's family. Life gradually returned to normal, with Mr. Chinlin continuing to fulfill his duties as Robert's guardian. Kurt found companionship in a single mother whose daughter attended the same kindergarten as Robert. Their children quickly became friends, sparking hope in Kurt's parents for his personal happiness. Despite moving forward, Kurt remained dedicated to honoring Jolie's memory. He regularly spoke to Robert about his mother, sharing photos and videos to ensure her presence was never forgotten. He reassured the boy that his mother's love would always surround him, even in her absence.